Good morning. Good morning, friends. So welcome to those who are gathered here. And friends, welcome to those of you that are gathered online. What a wonderful gift. Our community is able to gather together regardless of where our physical location is. Last week, Mark shared that Dwight and I were going to bring the message today, but because of some unforeseen circumstances, we're moving our message to next week. Our message, we're very excited about our clever chemistry title, is C3, Covenant Cancer in the Church. So we'll do that next week. This week, Mark continues his series on Minding of the Light, with a focus on others and community. And as I reflected upon this theme, I started to remember a quote that I'd saved several years ago. And from time to time I do save quotes. I think partly because sometimes someone who's clever, who is more insightful, can put into words what I could not, but I recognize the truth when I see it in their quote. And sometimes the quotes provide me a slightly different perspective of my understanding of something, and in that subtle change, I know I get to more fully see and understand God. Well, I am happy to share I found the quote. It's from Fred Rogers. Now, Fred Rogers may not be a name that we hear as much today, may not be quite as familiar, but Fred Rogers was Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Now, one of the gifts I'm giving you today is I am not going to sing the theme song because I can't carry the tune, but it starts to play in your head. And those of us that have any memories know that Mr. Rogers spent a lot of time in your home if you had children of a certain age. And he sure was in our home a lot with our daughter Megan and Mr. Rogers and his neighborhood. And now what you may not know about Fred Rogers is that he was an ordained Presbyterian minister, and that his show, which ran, I think, in fact, I wrote it down, let me make sure I say it right, from 1968 to 2001, and during that time in his neighborhood, weren't we greeted and became acquainted with a lot of people. When discussing his life and program later in his time after the program had ended, this is Mr. Rogers' quote. "I believe that appreciation is a holy thing, that when we look for what's best in the person we happen to be with at the moment, we're doing what God does all the time. So in loving and appreciating our neighbor, we're participating in something that is sacred." Please join me in prayer. Loving, gracious God, thank you for a community where we appreciate each other, where we experience your presence. May our hearts and minds be open to you.
to bend, we will not be ashamed. To turn, turn will be our delight, till by turning, turning we come round right. 'Tis a gift to be knowing, 'tis a gift to be kind, 'tis a gift to wait, to hear another's mind, that when we speak our feelings we might come out true. 'Tis a gift for me and a gift for you. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we will not be ashamed. To turn, turn will be our delight, till by turning, turning we come round right. 'Tis a gift to be loving, 'tis the gift of all, like a warm spring rain, bringing beauty when it falls. And as we use this gift, we might come to believe it is better to give than it is to receive. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend, we will not be ashamed. To turn, turn will be our delight, till by turning, turning we come round right. Apostle Paul, so long of prayer, bent down his knees to pray for the saints in the community, and you and me today. May you be rooted and grounded in love, strengthened in the Spirit through faith, to know the height and depth and length and breadth of God's understanding and grace. He said we're all one body, though each has different gifts, given for the common good. Together we are lifted up and rooted and grounded in love, strengthened in the Spirit through faith, to know the height and depth and length and breadth of God's understanding and grace. Let all you do be done in love, and open your heart wide. If you live by the Spirit, let the Spirit be your guide, and you be rooted and grounded in love, strengthened in the Spirit through faith, to know the height and depth and length and breadth of God's understanding and grace.
Colossians 1:26-27. The mystery that has been hidden throughout the ages and generations, but has now been revealed to his saints. To them God chose to make known how great among the Gentiles are the riches of the glory of this mystery, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. As Kingfishers Catch Fire by Gerard Manley Hopkins. As kingfishers catch fire, dragonflies draw flame. As tumbled over rim in roundy wells, stones ring like each tucked string tells, each hung bells. Bow swung finds tongue to fling out broad its name. Each mortal thing does one thing and the same, deals out that being indoors each one dwells. Selves goes itself, myself it speaks and spells, crying, what I do is me, for that I came. I say more, the just man justices, keeps grace that keeps all his goings graces, acts in God's eye what in God's eye he is, Christ. For Christ plays in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes not his, to the Father through the features of men's faces.
Good morning. Good morning to friends online. There are moments in history where it's important to know what to say next. This is one of those times in history. What to say after this week? What do you say next? I don't want to be a Quaker minister, and with that thought, I don't want to be a Quaker minister with my head in the sand. And it's my gumption that none of us want our heads in the sand, or for that matter, my head in the clouds, about what's been happening this past week in our country. Now is not the time to tiptoe around difficult subjects, even if those subjects are political in nature or content. We must talk about it respectfully, soberly, lovingly, and as humbly as possible. This week was a difficult week for many in the United States, with shifts in executive power, with the 28 signed executive orders by the 47th president, and many of those will come to mean what many of those will come to mean in the future have left many of us in an overwhelmed, a melancholy, and speaking for myself, in an emotional slump. I come here emotionally drained in many senses, as we wait for what the next news article is going to post. Indeed, there is a fight happening for what the future of our country is going to look like. And unfortunately, for the socially vulnerable, the migrant, the stranger, and the economically distressed in our country, these changes will impact them most of all. And yet, despite these troubling currents, what I would like to do this morning is to make some affirming statements. Affirming statements about what we believe as friends, about our neighbors, as well as about our relationship with our God. We have been exploring how we interpret the phrase the last few weeks, mind the light. To mind the light. What does that Quaker phrase mean? And in so doing is to stay sensitive in heart and in conscience, to be self-reflective, and to dare to be as honest, objective, and clear in conscience as we allow the Spirit of Christ to search our innermost selves and motives, To mind the light is to stay sensitive to the conscience, to stay true to what's going on inwardly as well as how that affects us outwardly. Most importantly, this isn't something that we can simply just do on our own. This isn't a maverick work where we just come along and think that we can get it right all by ourselves. No, most importantly, we must do this together as a community of Jesus, a community that is beloved by the Christ who has come, died, and raised for us. So it feels necessary to affirm how we see our neighbors. How do we see our neighbors? Whomever they are, wherever they are. How do we view them? Both those we gladly agree with, those are our neighbors, and those we vehemently disagree with, those too are our neighbors. How we believe that there is that of God within all people. There is that of God in every human being. The light of God inhabits all because the love of God reaches out and embraces all. Though it remains a matter of choice how this divine love is received or resisted in varying degrees by each one of us, we both can receive and resist at the same time. We each live in a tension with the holy. If we're really honest about it, we live in this state of tension, of both receiving and resisting. That's the status quo of the human experience, to live in tension with the holy. And while idealistically we may say, well, we give everything over to God, and to various degrees we can and will do that, but we live in tension with that. Each of us can embrace and, yes, resist the Holy Spirit, yet this does not discredit or expel us from the love of God discovered in the faith of Jesus. We live in tension with the holy. There is that of God in all that we meet, and there is that common thread of that tension within each and every one of us. Secondly, as Christians, as friends of Jesus, as followers of Spirit and universal love, as Spirit-led people, we are not called to hate, but to love others, even those we would deem our enemies. To that degree, we are not called to hate, but we are called to love. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. modeled how to integrate the negative, as he wrote, by facing the realities of racism, of poverty, and war, while insisting that we follow Jesus' command to love our enemies found in the Gospel of Matthew. King writes this: Let us be practical and ask the question, how do we love our enemies? First, we must develop and maintain the capacity to forgive. We must maintain and develop the capacity to forgive. Forgiveness does not mean ignoring what has been done or putting a false label on an evil act, soft-soaping it. No, you don't have to do that. It means, rather, that the evil act no longer remains as a barrier to the relationship. Nurturing, fostering, and maintaining a capacity to forgive. Second, we must recognize that the evil deed of the, as King writes, the enemy neighbor, the thing that hurts never quite expresses all that they are. no matter what people do, it is not an expression of all that they are. An element of goodness may be found even in our worst enemy. There is some good in the worst of us, and some evil in the best of us. There's that tension again that King is putting his finger on. When we discover this, we are less prone to hate our enemies. When we look beneath the surface, beneath the impulsive evil deed, and we see within our enemy neighbor a measure of goodness and know that the viciousness and evilness of their acts are not quite representative of all that they are. Seeing the whole person from a divine and universal perspective is so important. We see them in a new light. We recognize that their hate grows out of fear, pride, or ignorance, prejudice, and misunderstanding. But in spite of this, we know God's image is ineffably etched in their being. When we love our enemies, by realizing that they are not totally bad and that they are not beyond the reach of God's redemptive love, end quote. Martin Luther King, Jr. Thirdly, may we hold the balance of love, of power, and justice in such a way that people would see the life of the true Christ Jesus in each of us. It's this threefold approach, love, power, and justice, it is this threefold approach to existing that God upholds not just life, but this is speaking almost on an existential level, seeing our very existence as a triune convergence of love, power, and justice. Our lives are an experience of divine love, justice, and power. In every moment, even this moment now, there is the reality of love, power, and justice happening now. The challenge is, how do we align ourselves to this? How do we align our lives, our attitudes, and our behaviors by this trinity of character of God? In his lecture on love, power, and justice, 20th century German theologian Paul Tillich states the following: love, power, and justice are one in God. These are united in God, and they are united in the new creation of God in the world. We find this triunity happening between these three. While humankind is estranged from the ground of his being, from itself and from the world, he is still humanity. These three aspects of God remain ambiguous until they are united within a community of divine love. Tillich goes on to write that in the holy community, we call it the church or the gathered meeting, the beloved community, whatever you call it, a holy community of love, power, and justice in their ontological structure are affirmed. Their estranged and ambiguous reality is transformed into a manifestation of their unity within the divine life. It's a really fancy way of saying, where does love, power, and justice converge? And where can we understand it? Where does it stop being ambiguous? Tillich is saying it converges in the holy community. It converges in Reedwood Friends Church. It converges in the beloved community where you find life and truth and meaning and justice and beauty. I think beauty is another way of saying, of recognizing those three happening in real time and in real space. We call that's beautiful. Love, power, and justice converging. That's the goal. That's the ground that we seek to walk, and we seek to understand, and we seek to embody through our actions, how we act, what we build, how we walk, how we posture ourselves with other powers. Is what I do, could it be called beautiful? If love, power, and justice arrive on earth through a redeemed and beloved and God-loved community, what is the purpose of this community then? Besides just being that, besides having to say, we've arrived, which is hard to do. I don't know if I've ever found a community that's been able to say, we've arrived. It's constantly striving to understand and interpret and embody that. What is the purpose, though, of this community? What does it do? In a homily given in 1978, Archbishop Oscar Romero urged communities and individuals to recognize how their actions had the power to convert and transform the world. Romero wrote this: a Christian community, and Oscar Romero was a Catholic priest in Central America, South America. A Christian community is evangelized in order to evangelize. A light is turned on in order to give light. Quote, people do not light a candle and put it under a basket, said Christ. Quote, they light it and put it high so that it gives light. Matthew 5:15. Again, the Sermon on the Mount. That is true community. A community is a group of women and men who have found the truth in Christ and in his gospel and joined together to follow the way of truth more resolutely. It's not just a matter of individual conversion, but of community conversion. I'll read that line again. That's a good one. It's not just a matter of individual conversion, I'm saved, but of community conversion. We've experienced salvation and are experiencing salvation. What does that look like? Back to Tillich: love, power, and justice converging. Belonging, beauty, acceptance, embrace. Romero goes on to write, a community is a family that believes. It is a group where each member accepts God and feels strengthened by others. In their moments of weakness, they can help one another, love one another. They shed the light of their faith as examples for others. When that happens, the preachers no longer need to preach. The point of me doing what I'm doing right now is to ultimately remove myself from this job because everyone can do this. Everyone can embody it. When that happens, preachers no longer need to preach because there are Christians whose very lives have become a form of preaching. What does Francis of Assisi say? Preach the gospel always, and if necessary, use words. We've painted ourselves in quite a serious corner here with this sermon. Unless we drown in the spirit of seriousness or pious talk, I would like to conclude with a playful, catchy, finger-snapping, foot-tapping, dance-worthy song by the pop Christian band Gungor. I don't know if you've ever heard of Gungor or not. Listened to him for quite a while. He seems a pretty cool guy. It's a husband and wife duet, and they write these songs. This song that we're going to listen to, we're actually going to watch a video. And Bert, would you be able to do something with the lights as well? Thank you. This song was written in 17 years ago. This is not a new song. And the video is fun. It's like a flannel graph video. Some of the images, just give it some grace. Okay, just please, kind of perspective. Some of it are a little off, but this was written in 2008. I've listened to it a while, but I just thought today would mean something to play this. It speaks a colorful and truthful reminder for us of what to keep our attention upon. The name of the song is White Man. So let's give it a listen. Here, Bert. Thanks. Playful, catchy, but essential. As we go into a time of open worship, what has Spirit been speaking in your heart this week? What's He been saying? What has Spirit been saying? Secondly, how do we embody a community of love, power, and justice today? How might we embody that? To be a community, to actuate that, to realize that. Let us sit with that. Let us attend to the inward teacher. If you feel moved to share something that has opened to you through the community, Suzanne has a microphone. Friends online, if you feel so moved to share a word of Spirit, make sure you're unmuted so we can hear you. But let us attend and turn inward and center down, dear friends.